question you should ask is, why didn't we come before? What took us so long? I think that Israel is coming back to Africa in a big way. Africa is coming back to Israel. Kenya is a centrally important country in Africa. It has very strong relations with Israel for many, many decades. And I'm excited by coming there. It's the natural culmination of our relationship and the closing of ranks between Israel and Africa.
In Africa. You said then, when President Uhuru Kenyatta earlier in the year told you, requested you to visit Kenya, you described this as a moment of Africa coming back to Israel and Israel going back to Africa. Yes. First, what exactly do you mean by this?
You know, Israel was present in many African countries, not only in Kenya, which was a traditional friend, but in many African countries, and it ended because of political pressures. Right. From the Arab countries. And now our relations with the Arab world has changed. Not all of it is above board, but it's clear that there's been a big change. And many Arab countries see Israel not as their enemy, but as their partner in fighting militant Islam and assuring a future of stability. And one would hope prosperity in the Middle East. Well, what is true of so many of the Arab states is certainly true of the African states. And they see Israel as a partner in development and in security. In development, I mean things from water management to agriculture, to IT, to health, to science, everything. That's on the development side. And on the security side, it's obvious because we know we're in a great common battle. And this is true of many African states. I think it's been true of Kenya for some time. So we should have had this trip before, but it's time.
Right. In Kenya, Kenya has been facing serious problems with terrorism. Kenya being close to the West and Israel makes it vulnerable to terrorist attacks, yet they feel abandoned. Today, for example, the US has issued fresh travel advisories against Kenya.
Well, look, I don't want to speak about others, but I want to speak about Israel's attitude to Kenya and my own policy towards Kenya. I remember the horrific terrorist attacks in the shopping mall, and we offered immediately and sent whatever assistance we could. We do this on an ongoing basis. We really believe that this is a shared battle against people who would destroy our world, destroy our values, destroy our people. So I've been, I think, consistent in supporting Kenya and other African countries in this battle against this terrorism.
Where exactly do you support Kenya in security? What should Kenyans be looking at?
Well, I don't think we want to look at it. I think we're doing what we can on the government-to-government level, but I think it's important that the savagery doesn't win the day.
Okay. Some accusations that have been abound in Kenya is that while Israeli security agents have been cooperating with Kenyan counterparts in, weeding out terrorism, there have also been accusations of extrajudicial killings, especially of Muslim clerics in the coastal part of Kenya. I don't know how you respond to that.
I can't tell you that because we're not privy to that. I don't know if it's a fact either, but I know that from our point of view, we're dealing with the government. We're not dealing with anyone else.
Kenya has taken a bold step in closing the Dadaab refugee camp because of terrorism. Do you support this move?
That's an individual decision. And I leave it to each country to make its own decisions. If they ask me in the meeting with the leaders, I'll give them my advice. But I've learned over a few decades as both a diplomat at the UN and then as foreign minister and now fourth term as prime minister, give your advice directly to the leaders, not always in front of TV. Even the best African stations.
Okay. Of late, Kenya and other African countries have been looking towards the East, especially China, mostly because China provides aid with less conditionalities than the Western nations. what does Israel offer specifically to Kenya and Africa?
Well, we're going to talk about the whole gamut of aid. Look, even though Africa has natural rainfall in many places, it also has arid areas. Israel lost more than a third of its rainfall since our independence. Our population grew tenfold. Our GDP per capita grew 40 times. We ought to have a huge water problem, but we don't. We have a water surplus because we recycle 90% of our wastewater. We have drip irrigation. We have desalinization. We have water channeling and so on. So here's an area, you can't live without water and without proper water management, and this is something we offer to many countries and are glad to help in this. But the same is true in, I don't know, production of dairy. You know, which cow do you think produces most milk per cow? You'd think it's a French cow or a Dutch cow. It's not. It's an Israeli cow. It's a computerized cow. Every moo is recorded, you know, and it produces an enormous amount of milk. So if you're China, you're interested in that. If you're India, you're interested in that. Why not Africa? Why not increase the dairy production? I give you these two examples, water, milk, okay? But it goes on in every single area you can think of. Health services, everything. And I think this is very exciting. It's, this is really something in which we can improve the lives of Africans and better the relationship between Israel and Africa. I think it's a winner.
Right. You talked about political pressures before. I mean, the long-running Israel-Arab conflict, and especially Israel-Palestinian conflict, as we've seen a wedge being created between some African nations and Israel. And they accuse you specifically, Israel. In fact, they draw parallels on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with the South African apartheid, accusing Israel of undermining the peace process in constructing settlements in Palestinian territories, responding to Palestinian attacks with brutal force, killing a lot of civilians in Palestine. How do you respond to this?
Well, it's a false analogy because Israel is a liberal democratic state. 20% of our citizens are Arabs. They enjoy full civic rights. They're in the parliament, they're in the government, they're in the Supreme Court, and that's an unparalleled situation in a very broad radius in the Middle East. What's been holding up peace is not Israel. What's been holding up peace is the persistent desire to do away with Israel in any border. You know, my colleague who sat here, Ehud Barak, offered the Palestinians everything they said they wanted. They walked away. Same happened with my predecessor, Olmert. They walked away. I tried to call President Abbas to sit down across a negotiating table, even without a table, without conditions, immediately. He walked away. And I think the reason they walk away is that peace would require them to accept the idea that there is a Jewish state next to a Palestinian state and that it's going to be the permanent peace. They want a Palestinian state, but they don't want to accept the Jewish state. And of course, this is what's holding things back.
But the Palestinian Authority says the problem is, for example, the settlements undermining the peace process. That is why they won't come to a negotiating table with you.
Why not? It's an issue that has to be discussed. But why can't Jews live from their point of view? From their point of view, why can't Jews live there? I mean, we've only been attached to this land for 4,000 years. Well, 3,800 if you want to be precise, from the time of Abraham. Yet I recognize that in my ancestral homeland there live other people. I'm willing to have two states for two peoples. Why don't they? And in my state, Arabs live as equal citizens. Why do they deny that same idea in their conception of peace to Jews?
How important is it for you in your tenure to ensure that you get somewhere with this peace process?
Well, it's been important for me for all my tenures, but it takes at the very least two to tango. And you know, it can't be just that Israel is saying all the time, let's sit down and have direct negotiations without preconditions. But the Palestinians says no. They run away from negotiations, and then we're accused of scuttling negotiations. It's not only unfair, it's simply untrue.
Opportunity. Finally, Kenya's trade with Israel has been largely in favor of Israel, about $81.3 million in favor of Israel in 2015. How do you narrow the gap, and what specifically should an ordinary Kenyan be looking at from your trip?
I'm bringing close to 70 business people with me to Kenya. I want them to see investment opportunities in Kenya. I want them to see partnerships with Israel, both for, it's not merely export or import, it's really joint ventures. That's where you really get the best bang for the buck, you know, and that's the best thing that we can do is have Israelis and Kenyans work together on productive enterprises. That way, the know-how that we have is passed on to our Kenyan partners. And that becomes something that is self-sustaining. For economics is not a zero-sum game. Economics, if done right, is a win-win game. And, you know, the GDP grows for everyone. And the trade grows for everyone. I'd like to see that. I put my plane loads where my mouth is.
And I have to mention this, you're coming at a time when ICC, the International Criminal Court, is a big issue in Africa. Some African nations feel they should withdraw from the Rome Statute. What do you think?
I think the idea behind the ICC was a good idea, but like many other international forums, it's become highly, highly politicized. And I think that is a concern that is shared by Africans and people outside Africa as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prime Minister.
The question you should ask is, why didn't we come before? What took us so long? I think that Israel is coming back to Africa in a big way. Africa is coming back to Israel. Kenya is a centrally important country in Africa. It has very strong relations with Israel for many, many decades. And I'm excited by coming there. It's the natural culmination of our relationship and the closing of ranks between Israel and Africa.
In Africa.